Let's continue. Let's continue what we're talking about. I'm getting hot under the collar now. I want you to understand this. Okay? Because, see, too many of us in the ministry are just simply cowards. And I use that word often, and I stress it often, and I say it with attitude. Let me tell you something. Way too many of you are just absolute cowards. The best thing you can do is resign from the ministry, resign from the pulpit, because you're not leading, you're being led. Take the initiative, come up with the solutions. Lead because God tells you to lead. Now, I'm not talking about being a dictator. That's not what I'm talking about. But way too many of you are just simply mushy. Okay? You just need to just step down and walk away. Because you're not effectively leading the people of your church to the glory of God. Illustration, okay? Nehemiah illustrates that effective initiative is not short-lived. It is not. It runs to the end of the necessity until all of the bases are covered and the objective is achieved. This is a far cry from the common idea of people who think that they have an answer to the dilemma but cannot ride that initiative from the initial idea to its fulfillment. That's the reason why I push and I push and I push, okay? And I hold a higher standard. Let me tell you something. And I want you to understand this. If you have no expectations, people will always meet that expectation. None. One of the reasons why in this ministry, we have 697 churches around the world in 54 countries, 118 languages. Every single one of them have done three things and three things well. Number one, all of them have purchased their own land with their own money. Number two, all of them have built their own church buildings with their own money. And number three, they have a full-time paid pastor on staff. How? Because I lead. We lead in this ministry. It's not short-lived. And this gets repeated over and over and over again. This is exactly what Paul was doing. This is exactly what Nehemiah was doing. It was not short-lived. How many times you start a project and it ends somewhere along the line? See, the only kind of starting power that makes true leaders, listen to me, the only kind of starting power that makes true leaders is that which not only starts the ignition, but also drives to the end of the journey, organizing and mobilizing people along the way. You have to lead. We see that, too, in the life of Nehemiah. Notice that he knew his workers. He listed them by name and recorded precisely what section of the wall each one built. That's clearly laid out in the book of Nehemiah in chapter 3. He remained committed to the project and intimately involved in every phase of it until it was brought to its completion. He led by example. Don't just lead by your mouth. He delegated responsibility. He was not afraid of delegating responsibility. Nonetheless, Nehemiah did not take the responsibility of oversight and labor for the entire wall upon himself. No, he delegated. He taught other people how to lead. He appointed trustworthy men to oversee the sections of the labor, dividing their responsibilities in accord with their abilities. That's what I expect of my staff. That's what I expect with all those pastors on our staff, okay? You're going to lead, lead. But if I got to lead you to lead them, okay, then something's wrong. I don't need you. This was the only way to accomplish the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls in such a short period of time. It was a team effort, T-E-A-M, team. There is no I in team. There is no me in team. Or rather, the combined effort of multiple teams that he put together. That way, Nehemiah was able to employ the maximum number of workers and get the most out of them. Furthermore, he shrewdly assigned people to work at the locations close to their own homes. Isn't that amazing? He understood things. He could see the bigger picture. Remember, see, Nehemiah was at the 38,000 foot level looking down. He could see the whole picture. The priest, for example, built the section closest to the temple. Turn your Bibles to Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 1. Let me show you about taking initiative and coming up with solving problems. See, he could see the bigger picture. That's the problem, Pastor. You're not seeing the bigger picture of your ministry. You're not seeing the bigger picture of the church. You're not seeing the bigger picture of your community, your village, okay, of your providence, okay? You need to see the bigger picture. In Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 1. Then Eliashib, the high priest, arose with his brothers and priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They consecrated the wall of the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Hananel, because they lived there. Jedediah, the son of Harumpah, made repairs in front of his house. Look at verse 10. Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 10. Next to them, Jedediah, the son of Harumpah, made repairs opposite his house. Next to him, Hattush, the son of Hashabneah, made repairs. Look at Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 17. And after him, the Levites carried out repairs under Rehum, the son of Bani. Next to him, Hashabiah, the official of the half of the district of Keilah, carried out the repairs for his district. You see this? Look at Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 23. After them, Benjamin and Hashub carried out the repairs in front of their house. And after them, Hazariah, the son of Maaseiah, son of Anahiah, carried out the repairs beside his house. Now look at Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 30. Are you getting the picture? See, Nehemiah understood how to organize this. After him, Hananiah, the son of Selemiah, and Hanun, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section. And after him, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, carried out the repairs in front of his own quarters. Amen? And whatever you do me a favor, man. Don't name your sons these names, okay? I got enough time now. I got problems with my own name. And so on. This gave each team an extra incentive to do excellent work. Why? Because it was going to be in front of their house. No one would want the part of the wall next to his own house to be weak or sloppy looking, because now they had to take pride. They had to take ownership of what they had to do upon their shoulders. It was a wise plan that made the most labor. It guaranteed that they would take pride in their work and ensure that they would finish their assigned tasks. And that's the problem today, Pastor. So many of your churches and so many of your properties, your church building, are in such a disarray, and you're not even embarrassed by it. You have no pride. But worse yet, you have no respect for the glory of God and his house. Whatever building it is that you have selected to get together and call it a church. See, Nehemiah knew something that many of us fail to understand. He knew how to motivate people. It's a far cry difference from jumping up and down and hollering like a fool, screaming at people and barking orders, okay? Lathering up and foaming at the mouth like you're some rabbi, like some dog with rabies, like you're a rabid dog. No. He knew how to motivate people. See, when Nehemiah first arrived in Jerusalem, the captivity had already been over for a full century. Do you understand that? For over 100 years. Jews have been returning to the land in waves, starting with Zerubbabel in the year 538 before Christ, BC. The first job undertaken by the returnees was the rebuilding of the temple. The Old Testament book of Ezra records what an ordeal that was. Excuse me. After the foundation was laid in 536 BC, the temple remained unfinished for some 21 years. It just sat there. Can you imagine 21 years, nothing happens to him? Isn't that what most of your churches look like today? It was finally completed at the urging of Haggai and Zechariah in the year 1515 BC. Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem 71 years later in 414 BC. Can you imagine this? So for over 100 years, about 124 years to be exact, more or less, give or take, nothing craftsmen. No one in all of those years had taken the initiative to complete the real building of the city. Nobody, zero. The first sight that greeted every visitor was the ruined wall. Massive piles of rubble surrounded the city, mute, absolute mute testimony to the divine judgment that had overthrown Judea and carried their people into captivity. It was an embarrassment as well as a hazard, but 100 years had passed and no one had even suggested the rebuilding project. I can't tell you how many churches that I have visited all over the world. I don't care if I'm in Asia, I'm in Latin America, I am in Africa, I have been in Europe, and the conditions of the churches, they have not gotten better. In fact, they have gotten worse, and it doesn't seem to faze or bother anybody. Not even the pastor. You're not even embarrassed that you call this the house of God. The condition of the buildings of the churches are no better than the condition of the outhouses that are sitting out in back. Whew, have you ever been to some of them? It's absolutely scary. And they call this the house of God. Isn't it remarkable that Nehemiah, he was a newcomer to this city, could gather the people together and challenge them to do what? To rebuild the walls and get an immediate positive response. Why? No one ever asked him. Look, Nehemiah chapter 2, look at verse 18. Go back to chapter 2, the book of Nehemiah, verse 18. I told them how the hand of my God had been favorable to me, and also about the king's words which he had spoken to me. Then they said, let's arise. Listen to this. And then they said, look at this. This is how the people responded. It says, then they said, let us arise and build. So they put their hands to the good work. Seems to me that Nehemiah had more confidence in the people than the leadership of their people in Jerusalem. Seems to me I have more confidence in your people than you have in your own people. Now, let me say something here. Because it may get you upset. I've been known to do that from time to time. But let me see if I can explain it this way to you. Your people, your church, is a reflection of you. When you look in the mirror, you're not going to see anybody else's reflection but your own. When you look at the church, you're looking at yourself. You are the leader. Nehemiah obviously knew what it takes to motivate people. He understood that. Why? Well, let's stop for a moment. He took time to pray. How many of you take time to pray, to seek God's guidance? He took time to pray, to ask God. And God spoke to the depth of his heart. He did not do it by hype. He didn't do it by sheer manipulation. He didn't do it by theatrics. But he shared his vision in a way that people could grasp. He explained how the goal was attainable. And in Nehemiah's own words, I told them of the hand of my God. Look at verse 18. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 18. I told them how the hand of my God had been favorable to me, and also about the king's words which he has spoken to me. Then they said, let us arise and build. And so they put their hands to the good work. He helped them to see that this was the work of God. He showed them the spiritual importance of it. He was sincere and he was believable. His enthusiasm was infectious. His optimism was contagious. They caught the vision. What do your people catch? What do your people catch? And not only that, but Nehemiah did something else that many of us are not willing to do. He worked alongside his people. Do you hear me? He worked alongside his people. Nehemiah was not a passive leader. There's no such thing. That concept exists in the world, but there is no passive leadership in the Bible. Good leaders never are passive. They don't ask others to do what they are unwilling to do themselves. Hello? Nehemiah rolled up his sleeves and worked as diligently as anyone else. Nehemiah said this clearly in Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 21. He wasn't afraid of getting his own hands dirty, because this is what it says in Nehemiah chapter 4, 21. So we, notice the word we, notice that pronoun. So we carried on the work with half of them holding spears from dawn until the stars appeared. We. In fact, as Nehemiah described the work, he put in long days of nonstop toil until the task was absolutely complete. In Nehemiah chapter 4, it says this in verse 23. So neither I, my brothers, my servants, nor the men of God who follow me, none of us removed our clothes. Each took his weapon, even to the water, even to washing, to bathe. In Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 16, I also applied myself to the work on this wall. We did not buy any land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. All his other business was put on hold while he worked. They understood it was going to have to wait. He was relentless. Let me ask you, are you relentless? He was dedicated to the work. Let me ask you, are you dedicated to the work? And the people of Jerusalem followed his lead against all odds. They followed him against ridicule. They followed him against conspiracy. They followed him against discouragement. They followed him against deceit. And every form of vicious opposition that was raised against him. And this is what chapter 4 lays out for us. All the way from chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6 of the book of Nehemiah. It is a recount, and it's an account record in detail how Nehemiah's enemies had desperately tried to stop his work. In the face of opposition, he led. And because he led in the face of opposition, his people followed him. What about you? And in spite of all of that, because of the initiative of this one man, the entire wall around Jerusalem was completed in just 52 days' time. Do you remember the king asked him, how long? And he gave him a specific time. In Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15. So the wall was completed on the 25th of the month of Elul in 52 days. That is amazing. Nehemiah was the epitome of an effective leader. Are you the epitome of an effective leader? He was a starter. He was strongly motivated. He knew how to organize and motivate followers. He overcame obstacles. He was practical and wise and determined. He was a man of action, but thoughtful as well. All of these qualities are essential to effective leadership. Combined, they made Nehemiah the kind of a man like the Apostle Paul, who was not afraid to take initiative, and therein lay the secret of both men's success. They were not afraid to take initiative. In the tempest, in the storms, in the battles, in the war, in the face of opposition, they stood strong. Meanwhile, back in Fair Havens, the soldiers and sailors discussed Paul's advice and decided to reject it. Let's go back to Paul. In Acts chapter 27, look at verse 11 and 12. Look at these fools. But the centurion was more persuaded by the pilot and the captain of the ship than by what was being said by Paul. Look at verse 12. Because the harbor was not suitable for wintering, the majority reached a decision. Look at the majority. The mass mob. The majority reached a decision to put out to sea from there, and if somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete facing southward and northward, they would spend the winter. Look at it. The majority made that decision. This is madness. In what seems as an unusual and utterly desperate deviation from the norm, the captain of the ship, can you believe it? Seems to have said, you know what he did? The captain of the ship, this is insanity. He solicited the will of the majority of the people on the ship. At that point, he abdicated being the captain. That's what he did. That's what you do, Pastor. I'm going to put my hand up and see which way the winds are blowing for the majority of the people in the church to say what they're going to decide. Over my dead body, that's going to happen. Most were in favor of trying to reach a more advantageous harbor. The problem is you're not going to reach it. That was the problem with that idea. Let me tell you something. You give me one great, careful, thoughtful, analytical, wise leader over the majority any single time. That's what I'm going to take. But in this case, they took a vote. Can you believe that they took a vote? A vote. You know, they decided to employ democracy inside of a theocracy. That's exactly what you do, Pastor, in the church. The ship's captain let an opinion, poll. He let an opinion poll make the decision for him. Oh, you know, I don't know about your country, but in my country, opinion polls are all over the place. And that's what they are. It's an opinion poll. I don't listen to that nonsense. Notice that the decision was made for purely pragmatic reasons. That's the problem with your pragmatism. Because they made everybody feel good. No one wanted to stay at Fairhavens. Of course not. They didn't have enough. Well, the idea of having to share wasn't a great idea for them either. They were motivated by expediency only and selfish desire, not by wisdom. And that was the problem. They did not have any good judgment whatsoever. And here's the third principle of leadership. A leader uses good judgment. That's the issue that you're going to have to face. If I was to evaluate all of the decisions you ever made, would the phrase good judgment come up in that evaluation? Or would it be, I put my finger in the wind to see which way the winds were blowing favorably, depending upon the majority and how they felt and what they wanted to do. Let me tell you something about the majority. The majority of people will always seek the absolute minimum with the maximum benefit and their least participation in you doing all of the work.